So today I thought I'd talk about The Echo Killing and how it's the most personal book, in a way, that I've ever written, and sort of what led me to write something that has, for the first time, autobiographical elements to it. So here we go. Savannah to me is a character in the book. So taking it out of Savannah and putting it anywhere would be like taking one of the main characters out and making them someone very different. And so it would have a huge impact on it. So it would not be the same book if it weren't there. And when I did write about a reporter, no matter what I tried to do, she ended up in Savannah. Even though I later worked in other cities, I worked in Baton Rouge, I worked in New Orleans, I worked in Texas. But Savannah was the one that out of all of them, in terms of crime reporting, it really stayed with me. It was the place I remember incredibly vividly. And when I invented a crime reporter, and in a city that she knew like the back of her hand, I chose Savannah. There was a night that I remember really vividly that I was working late. As a crime reporter, you work nights. And I would work from 4 until about 1 in the morning. And there was a symphony in the park, and I can still close my eyes and see it. It was in Forsyth Park, one of the most famous parks in America. Beautiful symphony playing, tunes I didn't know symphonic music, so it was all new to me, and my friends were all there. And I went from a stabbing scene to join them in the park for half an hour on my dinner break, where they were drinking champagne and listening to the music. And then I went back out on the street to cover an armed robbery half an hour later. And that, to me, that sums up Savannah, and that's why I find it so fascinating. I have heard from people who read my book and lived in Savannah, and I have to say that, like, honestly, I was so worried that I'd screw that up, because I love that city and I want to do it a service. I want to do right by it. And don't use this as an invitation, but not one person has emailed and said, that's not the Savannah I recognize. And it's quite the opposite. And that just fills my heart with, like, yes. Every time I get an email or a message from somebody in Georgia who says they liked it, I'm just like, yes, I'm doing this. I'm doing right by Savannah. I'm doing right by that state, which was a place I think of fondly. Harper has so many elements of my life, and I want to be honest about that, in that her job is the same as my job. I placed her on the same street I lived on when I lived in Savannah. So she lives on Jones Street, and I lived on Jones Street. And she obviously goes to the place. The newspaper in Echo Killing is where the newspaper building was on Bay Street when I worked for it in Savannah. And no longer is there. It moved, I think, about 20 years ago to the suburbs. But I put it back where it was. So those are my acknowledgements of my connection to the story. Everything else in her life I've made up. Her personality is different from mine. Her hard shell, I never quite got there with the hard shell. I was always the reporter who cried at crime scenes. So I am not as hard as she has become, but her childhood was different from mine. And her trauma is her own. So that is all invented. But the setting and her friendships, some of those I've drawn from reality. Certainly DJ is based on somebody I really knew. And Bonnie is based on somebody I really knew. And Robert Smith is based on somebody I really knew. But just based. Everything I take and turn around and change, because it wouldn't be fun just to make it completely biographical. It teaches you about people. It teaches you about the world we live in and the things that we often choose not to see. And it teaches you about human emotions and human interaction. And that is sort of the grounding for any author. That's the grounding for all interactions. The grounding of drama, of hate and love and need and greed and desperation. I mean, every good book is based on some mixture of those. And that's crime reporting. Yeah, I think your entire perspective gets skewed. And I do think that's true of all journalism. It's one of the things that can turn off the public, is knowing the truth about how journalists, hope that things will go terribly wrong in some ways. You see it in political reporting, and you certainly will see it in crime reporting, which is, if nobody shoots anybody on a Saturday night and you're sitting at the newspaper from 4 o'clock till midnight, that's a boring night. So that flip of your morality, the way that takes who you were before you became a crime reporter and changes them into who you become, that I find fascinating. That's a fascinating thing that happens to pretty much everybody. And it takes a long time to undo, I think, once you stop. I am on a personal first name basis with my local locksmith. And I think it makes you not so much paranoid as simply aware. What the police would say is simple protection. I mean, the main way people get broken into today, everywhere, is people forget to lock their door. They just leave the door open and somebody just walks in. I've done this with my car, and I was horrified at I who have been to many a homicide scene, would forget to lock my car door. So yeah, I have really good locks. I have pretty good tech around for protection. I don't have any weapons because I know, as any cop would tell you, it'll just be used against you. And I know the rules, so yeah, I think it makes you very cautious. She'll be covering other crimes along the way, so there will be another murder that draws her attention and pulls her into a place where she feels she must be involved and she must understand what's happened. Because I think with Harper, more than anything, seeing a crime solved because there's an unsolved crime in her history, seeing that, having that resolution, that's everything to her. That's the most important thing. She's irresistibly pulled to that. So she'll continue to face. It's a tough one in A Beautiful Corpse. It's a tough one for her to deal with, because this time it's someone she knows. So, and that girl does not like murder close to her. I mean, none of us do, but her especially. So yeah, I hope you guys like it. I am really proud of it. So thank you so much for joining me today to talk about Savannah and the echo killing. If you like the video, I hope you'll subscribe. There's a button, please do, so that you can see the other videos that I'll be putting out over the coming months. And if you haven't read The Echo Killing, it's available now in all good bookstores in a multitude of languages. And come back, hang out with me. We'll talk more.